Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2024. My name is Madonna Yoder, and you're joining hundreds of folders around the world on this 25-day journey into the infinite world of repeating patterns folded from a single sheet of paper. You'll discover many different twists in this challenge, building up to advanced patterns with hybrid hexagon twists. This is day one of Advent of Tessellations 2024, and we're going to be folding this pattern that's a variant on Daisy Chain by Eric Jardy. And the way that it's a variant is it has this kind of swirly set of interactions in the center instead of a closed hexagon twist. So actually this pattern doesn't involve any twists at all. It's just a great way to get used to dealing with gridded paper and pleats running together. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got my 16 division triangle grid on a hexagon. That's 16 divisions from top to bottom, and those same divisions on all three directions. If you're not familiar with this grid, it's basically fold in half, then open up, then fold the quarter lines, then fold those spaces in half and those spaces in half. I have a little bit more detail on that in the welcome video to the series. So the first thing I'm going to do with this piece of paper is locate the center. So I'm going to write an A in the center, and I'm going to use that as a standard for all of the tutorials this season. Writing an A in the very center. Now this center is going to be hidden rather quickly, but it's still there in case we need to know about it. So next up, what I'm going to have in this pattern is a set of folds, and I'm using blue for valley folds and red for mountain folds. This will be a set of folds that has an intersection of three valleys, one spacing away from the center, and an intersection of three mountains, one spacing further than that. So if we zoom in, if we're going to fold this on the paper, I'm going to bring up the intersection of mountains, and pinch these two folds going towards the top and towards the bottom of the paper in over the center and let that fall down. Now I've left some ambiguity about which way this flap lays down, and I'm going to put it up towards the top. So since we're going to be doing the same move all the way around the center, what I want to pay attention to in terms of what the paper is doing, I can see that this mountain fold going out to the edge hits right at the corner. So when I rotate my paper, so I've got that next corner in my hand, I know that the mountain fold is coming straight to the corner. And then as I work that in, I'm going to open up the long plate there so that I can find those three mountain folds and pinch in over the center and lay it down on top of the flap that I was just working on. Now I'll repeat going around the center. So pinch with the mountain fold coming from the corner of the paper, open the long flap down below the intersection point of these mountain folds, and notice that I wasn't trying to hold this while I was opening the other flap. I just want to be aware that this is the mountain fold, which helps me identify how far back to erase the other plate, and then I can set up another of these three-way intersections of mountain folds on top, and again closing over the center and laying it down on top of the flaps we've already worked on. Rotating again, I'll do the same thing, except that this time, when I open up that pleat going further down, I'm running into another pleat. So there's multiple ways to resolve this situation. One way would be to complete this step exactly like we've been doing it and have this be an overlap of the two pleats. Another way is to open up the pleat overlap and say, oh, I recognize between these three-way intersections of mountains, there's always two grid spacings. So there's going to be two grid spacings to the next one and two more to the next one. And these mountain folds are all going out to the corners of the hexagon. And then we'll be pinching them in towards the center and laying them down rotationally the same way that we did before. And the distinction between doing one move and then doing the resolution of the pleat overlaps versus finding all three of those points at the same time is fairly minimal. It just might be easier for you, particularly if you're very new to folding origami tessellations, to have them, to have the first one more solid before adding the next two. So the great thing about these videos is that they are recorded. You can go back and see exactly what I did already. And then the next step is to go one space out from these intersections of mountains towards the corner of the paper. And we're going to put another three-way intersection of mountain folds at that point, one grid spacing out. So I will be opening up the fold that goes to the corner, pressing it down, and this time we're closing that intersection towards the outside. So previously we had closed towards the center of the paper. This time we're closing towards the outside. And I'm going to go around the paper, adding in these exact identical three-way intersections all the way around. And then we'll finish up by flipping the paper over and working on the other side. Now there may be a particular way of going around the paper that's going to be easier for the next move, but I'm not even certain of exactly which way that would be right now. So I'm going to pick the next layer on top, going around in the same order we did before, going one space out from the previous three-way intersection. I'm opening up the flap as it goes back to the corner of the paper, putting in my new three-way intersection. One key thing to keep in mind here is that my valley folds are one grid spacing away from the mountain folds. And I'm going to keep my flap going around in the same direction as before. So moving on to the next flap, I'll open just that flap. And as I'm putting in the new three-way intersection, I'm getting an overlap of pleats with the folds that I had put in already. Next up, same thing. And same on the next one as well. And again, this is recorded. You can go back and watch when I did the slower repeats the first two times. And then for our final one, when I open this up, I now have parallel pleats to my original pleat going to the corner that I opened on both sides, both left and right. So I will have a pleat overlap on both sides of this new intersection. So I'm going to hold that in place and grab this overlap on the right with my right hand and flip over, still holding that overlap. And on this side of the paper, at every overlap, we want to open up enough that we can lift this area between the mountain folds. So everything my hands are on now is down flat, and this little portion in here as well. The rest of it is sticking up above the table. And what we're going to do is, just like we saw around the very center, we're going to have two spaces between intersections of mountain folds. So you might have just one space. We need to back that out until we get two spaces. You might even have opened it enough to see three spaces, but what we really want are those two spaces between the three-way intersections of mountain folds. And then our valley folds are going to be outside of this half hexagon, this trapezoid that we're seeing near the edge of the paper. So when we're putting this in, these two flaps are going to come towards each other. They're going to just touch under there, and we're going to lay this flap down on top. And I could have been using the bone folder all along to help smooth things out, but this one really felt like it needed it more than the other interactions. So now I'm going to pick another overlap of pleats. We'll open first one and then the other, pushing up from behind to lift this grid line that's two spaces in from the edge and is going two spaces between these three-way intersections of mountain folds. Again, I can hold it so that the rest of the paper is down flat and this area is lifted up. And then I'm going to push these flaps in, and all of this is happening on grid lines. So if you notice in your paper that it's not quite on grid lines, you can give it a little extra push until it snaps onto the grid. And those legs are going to come in, and then this half hexagon is going to lay down flat. And we can press it to help it stay in place. Rotating again, we're doing exactly these steps on all of the remaining pleat overlaps. I'll open first one pleat and then the other. Find my two spaces of mountain fold between these three-way intersections of mountains. Bring these two little legs in towards each other while adding valley folds outside of kind of the platform sitting on top. And press. Again, this is all on grid lines. We're not adding any new creases to the paper. Next up, I've got another pleat overlap that I will open up, again, pushing from behind to locate this line as a mountain fold, and then letting these flaps fold in towards each other and these flaps go out away. There are alternative ways to fold this where I could be layering it any number of ways, but this is part of what makes it this pattern and not another pattern. So with the next overlap, I'm going to open up, again, pushing from the back. And you can think of it either as bringing the flaps in or as putting these new valley folds on the outside to get that platform that was raised up after untangling the pleat overlap to return to a flat state. Opening up the final overlap. Usually in origami tessellations, when you get around to where you started working around the center, there's some extra step, but with this one, we just do exactly the same thing, making sure that we're staying on grid lines. All their folds are on grid lines, that is. And squash, or press rather, there's no new folds to finish. And flipping over, we now have our little flower on these spokes that are heading out and can be used to repeat the pattern. So this spoke you could think of as exactly the same as this one. So the entrance here is the same as the exit here. And you can take this whole thing and copy it over. And that's actually exactly what I teach inside of Tessellation Foundations. This particular piece is one of the tutorials in Tessellation Foundations, and you can see these exact flowers repeated in a ring around the center, and there's no end to how many you can add. The only limit is how much grid you're willing to fold. So happy folding, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again for day 2 of Advent of Tess, where we're folding this pattern of closed and open triangle twists that is repeating the same way on both sides of the paper. Happy folding, and see you there.